This slideshow will teach you how the Salamander Crossing Brigades work, including how to find amphibian crossing sites, what to bring with you in the field on migration nights, and what to expect when you go out on Big Night. If you haven't already watched the other slideshows on amphibian ecology and conservation and species identification, we encourage you to check those out as they provide valuable context for this slideshow. In addition, the separate slideshow on staying safe on big nights is an absolute must. The goals of the Salamander Crossing Brigades are threefold. First, to reduce roadkill associated with the spring amphibian migration. Second, to provide data that can help inform land protection projects and road improvements for wildlife. And third, to increase public support for amphibian conservation. So what do the Salamander Crossing Brigades do exactly? This is divided into two time periods, before the big nights and on the big nights. Before the big nights, we ask all volunteers to attend a volunteer training, or in this case, to watch our series of training videos. So congratulations, you're halfway there. Next, we ask people to stay on call. As you'll remember, the amphibian migration is entirely weather dependent, so we can't know very far in advance when it's going to happen. So what does staying on call involve, and how can you find out when big nights will happen? First, we encourage you to sign up for our Salamander Crossing Brigade email list at harriscenter.org. We use this list to share salamander news, give field reports after the big nights have happened, and of course to let people know when we think a migration might be on the way. Now we try not to send too many emails. We don't want to burden your inbox. So if you're curious about whether a migration might be in the works and you haven't heard from us yet, you can always check out our 5-day salamander forecast at harriscenter.org. We update this almost daily during salamander season, which runs from mid-March through early May in the Monadnock region. And it's color-coded, red, yellow, green, though we often wait till the last minute to switch something over to green because it can be tricky to predict very far in advance with great certainty that a migration will happen. But you can scan those colors and plan accordingly, and beneath them we also have a more detailed narrative that explains some of the more nuanced features that we're looking at, how things might be different in one part of the region from another. Now that really is geared toward the Monadnock region of southwest New Hampshire. So if you live further afield, you can do what we do and simply watch the weather. The three pieces of information that we look for when formulating our salamander forecast is whether the ground has thawed and there's minimal snow cover, whether nighttime temperatures are expected to be 40 degrees or higher, and whether there is rain in the forecast after dark. That's what you should look for too. One last thing to do before the big nights while you're on call is to prepare your field gear. Here's what to bring or wear every time you head out for an amphibian migration. First and foremost, wear a reflective vest. This is an essential piece of safety equipment. It's so important that if you don't yet have a reflective vest or can't find the one you do have, you should not head out on the road for big night. You can buy reflective vests at nearly any hardware store, sporting goods store, and of course the internet. But if cost is a barrier for you and you live in the Monadnock region, the Harris Center may have a vest you can borrow. Just drop us a line. Rain gear. It will be raining. That is the point of big night. And you will be much more comfortable if you're wearing a rain jacket and rain pants for your time on the road. In addition, we often say that migrations happen on the first warm, rainy nights of spring. But warm means something different to a wood frog who can literally freeze solid and survive than it does to you and me. And a few hours on the road in 43-degree rains can get a bit chilly, so bundle up. Bright lights are key. Cell phone flashlights are not sufficient. Headlamps are great for seeing your data forms and being extra visible to passing cars. But when it comes to looking for amphibians in the road, nothing beats a handheld flashlight where you can direct the beam of light. Many volunteers opt to use both. And of course, you'll want to make sure that your lights are fully charged or have fresh batteries before you head out the door. You can download data forms at harriscenter.org. And if you're going to a site with a site coordinator, we'll talk about what that means in a bit, they may have data forms for you. Their data forms will be printed on Write in the Rain paper, which is coated with a waxy substance that keeps it from falling apart in the rain. Write in the Rain paper does not work with pen, only pencil. So make sure you bring pencils with you when you head out for a night on the road. A clipboard or notepad is helpful for leaning on while you record your data. Camera or phone. You are definitely going to want to take pictures of these amazing amphibians and share them with everyone you know. We also have a form on our website where you can share your photos with us, and then we'll include them in our online field reports, our emails, our social media. The last two items are optional and require a bit of explanation. First, a bucket. At some sites, on some nights, there are so many amphibians that it can be more efficient to carry multiple amphibians across the road at one time in a bucket than to carry them one by hand. If you choose to bring a bucket, it's important to ensure that it has no cleansers or other toxins in it that could be harmful to amphibians if it were absorbed through their skin. So no bleach, no household cleansers, no grease. Clean buckets only. Next, if you spend enough time out on the road on big nights, eventually you will encounter a road-killed amphibian. You have a choice in this moment. You can choose to ignore the dead amphibians and focus your efforts solely on helping the living, or you can choose to count the dead amphibians on your data sheet. If you choose to count the dead amphibians, we ask that you remove them from the road. That's because if we didn't remove them from the road and we each counted them, we might have 5 people walk past the same dead wood frog, each recording it, and then we'd think we had 5 dead wood frogs, when in fact we only had 1. So if you choose to count any road-killed amphibians, we ask that you remove them from the road. Now you can do this by hand, just like you would do with living amphibians. But not everybody's comfortable with that, and so some folks opt to bring a spatula or a scoop for moving dead animals off the road. So that's what you need to know and do before the big nights. How about on the big nights? On the big nights, you are going to head to your nearest crossing site or potential crossing site in need of investigation. We'll talk about that in a moment. When you get there and you're all set up in your reflective vest and with your flashlight, you're going to walk up and down the road, scanning the road with your flashlight for amphibians, and when you find them, you are going to move them across the road by hand in the direction they were going. Our goal is to move amphibians off the road faster than they can move themselves, and therefore to decrease their risk of coming into contact with a car. Now these animals know where they're going. In the beginning of the season, nearly all of them will be heading to the breeding wetland. Midway through the season, you may have some animals leaving that wetland, their courtship and egg laying done for the year, and others just arriving. So it's really important to move them in the direction that they are headed. If they are pointed straight up and down the road and you can't tell which way they're going, then pick the dominant direction that most of the other amphibians seem to be moving on that night. You are also going to keep count of how many amphibians you move off the road by species. These counts are really important information for us for assessing whether sites might be good candidates for things like amphibian tunnels or road closures, and also just for sharing with the community to have a sense for what the migration was like that night. It's really great to team up with someone. We have one person moving the critters, calling out 1 wood frog, 2 peepers, 1 spotted salamander, and the other person keeping count on the data form. At the end of the night, it is really important to report your data. So if it just sits there on your data form in your house and isn't shared with us, then we're not able to make use of it for conservation. And then of course, first and foremost, your responsibility is to stay safe. We have an entire slideshow focused on staying safe, and it is really vital that you watch that, but we'll go over some key elements in this next slide. So we have a separate slideshow devoted entirely to safety on big nights, but because it's such a critical consideration and it can't hurt to hear a few things twice, we're going to go over it very briefly here too. First and foremost, whenever you are out on the road, you should be wearing a reflective vest so that you are visible to cars. You should also have a bright light or perhaps two bright lights. Again, cell phone flashlights are not enough. You should be staying alert, looking and listening for vehicles at all time, and as soon as a car comes into view, you should be stepping aside, off the road. Remember, our goal here is to move amphibians across the road faster than they can move themselves, not to stop traffic. We are not crossing guards. We are crossing brigades. You also should never shine your lights at cars, lest they catch a driver in the eye, creating an unsafe situation. And this one always sounds obvious, but there's always a moment when you might think that you can run out and grab an amphibian real quick before a car comes through. And bottom line is, don't do it. Roads are slick on big night. It's easy to slip. It's easy for an amphibian to squirm out of your hands. You just have to step aside whenever a car comes by. Do not risk your life. Just wait it out, keep your fingers crossed, and tend to that amphibian when the car has gone. Every year, we hear from people who are concerned because they've heard that the oils on our hands can harm amphibians. This is a myth. It is safe to briefly handle amphibians for the short time it takes to move them across the road, as long as our hands are clean, wet, and free of toxins. That said, there are plenty of things that we put on our hands that can harm amphibians who readily absorb chemicals through their skin. So before handling amphibians, make sure your hands are free of bug spray, sunscreen, lotion, perfume, and especially hand sanitizer. We recommend washing your hands with soap and water before heading out to the field, sticking them in a puddle as soon as you arrive on site to make sure they stay wet, and then washing with soap and water again when you get home at the end of the night. Non-powdered nitrile gloves are also a great option. When holding amphibians, keep a gentle but firm grasp around the center of their bodies. Don't squeeze too hard, but you want to make sure that they don't wriggle free, especially if you're holding them at waist height as you walk across the road. Do not pick them up by their legs or their tails, as this can injure them. In addition, some salamander species have an adaptation for escaping from predators where they can actually detach their own tail and leave it wriggling while they escape. It takes a great deal of energy for them to regrow their tails, however, so we want to make sure that they don't see us as a predator. So when holding them, hold them around the center of their bodies, not by legs, not by feet, not by tails. And lastly, when you get to the other side of the road, make sure that you release them gently. No tossing or dropping from waist height. So how do you know where to go on big night? Over the years, our volunteers have identified a number of amphibian crossing sites in the Monadnock region and beyond, which we feature on an interactive map that's available at harriscenter.org. Now this is just a screenshot of that map, but if you go to the Harris Center website and click on this image, it will open the map in a new window where it's fully interactive. You can zoom in, pan out, and click on any of these icons for more information about a particular site. You'll see that we've grouped these sites into 3 categories based on how much information we have about them, as well as how closely we coordinate volunteer activity at any given site. The yellow salamanders denote our most well-established crossings. These are places volunteers have been going for many years and where we're fairly certain there will be a lot of amphibian activity if conditions are right. We have detailed information available for each of these sites, including parking, species info, and more, which you can download at harriscenter.org. Each year, we also do our best to line up a volunteer site coordinator to be a go-to person at each of these crossings on big nights, putting up salamander crossing signs, traffic cones, handing out data forms, that sort of thing. So if you're new to the crossing brigades and you live near one of these crossings, they're a great place to get started. You'll see that there are just a couple of crossings that are denoted with a white salamander. These are sites that have a fair amount of amphibian activity, but where we've discontinued volunteer coordination due to aggressive drivers or neighbors who were unsupportive of the Crossing Brigade project over the years. So if you choose to go to those sites, use caution. The vast majority of our sites, the green frog sites, are what we call our anecdotal sites. These are sites for which we have varying levels of information. We may have very detailed location information as well as specific counts for a number of big nights, or we may have something as simple as someone telling us they saw a spotted salamander on that road once. We've included all of them on our map so that we can provide as much information as possible for people who are looking to find crossing sites close to home, but there's widely variable information about these green frog sites. We're always looking for more information about these particular sites. Over the years, we've heard from more and more people outside of the Monadnock region who are looking to connect with other people to move amphibians across the road in their communities. So we've slowly expanded this map to include crossing sites that we've heard about in other parts of New Hampshire as well. The vast majority of the sites we know of are in the Monadnock region, but we do include some sites on the seacoast, in the North Country, and beyond. We are strictly limited to New Hampshire here, as there are other organizations who coordinate crossings in Vermont, Massachusetts, and Maine, and they're a better place to go for information for those states. It's important to note that this map is by no means exhaustive or complete. There are many crossings we certainly don't know about, and we'd love your help to find them. Our goal is for people to drive as little as possible on big nights so that they're not inadvertently running amphibians over on their way to help other amphibians. And so we're adding new sites to this map all the time with the help of volunteers like you. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to find new crossing sites in a few minutes. An important element of the Salamander Crossing Brigades is sharing your data so that it can have a life beyond you. We share field reports with the Salamander Crossing Brigade community after each migration, and we also are often asked to share data with conservation commissions and other decision makers in local communities. So it's really important to turn in your counts. If you're at a site with a site coordinator, you can simply hand them your data form when you're checking out at the end of the night, or verbally share your counts with them. If you're at a site without a site coordinator, we encourage you to come home and submit your counts and any photos you want to share with us via the online forums at harriscenter.org. The longer you wait, the less likely you are to actually do this, and then we will have lost all of that valuable information. So I encourage you as soon as possible, preferably the very night that you were out with the critters, to submit your counts and photos at harriscenter.org. So we've talked a little bit about site coordinators, but I want to share some more information about what these special volunteers do, because we're always recruiting site coordinators for our well-established crossings in the Monadnock region. You might be new to this project now, but in another year or two, perhaps you'd consider volunteering as a site coordinator too. The most difficult thing that site coordinators do is agree to stick around for the duration of salamander season and to be on the road if there is a big night. All of our other volunteers, we tell you to come if you can and stay as long as you like, but we ask our site coordinators to make an effort to be there for migrations. They also familiarize themselves with their crossing site so they can answer questions about parking, what species you're likely to see, whether it's family friendly, and sometimes we ask them to go out and assess conditions on the ground, such as whether the ground has thawed there yet or if it's still snow covered. They also keep track of field equipment, so the sites with site coordinators are sites where we're able to have salamander crossing signs and traffic cones to slow traffic. They also have data forms to hand out to volunteers, amphibian ID sheets, extra reflective vests, and pencils on hand. They orient volunteers to each site, so we ask you to check in with a site coordinator if there is one at your site, and to check out at the end of the night when you go. When you check in, they'll let you know any important information for that particular night. They'll give you a data form on Write in the Rain paper if you need it. You can tell who the site coordinators are because they'll be wearing reflective vests that say Harris Center on the back in reflective lettering. They also are available to share information with passersby. Sometimes drivers stop and want to know what the heck we're doing out there, and our site coordinators are happy to talk to them. They can help you identify amphibian species, and then they collect and submit amphibian counts from their site at the end of each night in a timely fashion so that we can get our field report out to everyone else as soon as possible. So again, if this sounds like something you might be interested in doing, drop us a line. We're always looking for additional folks to serve as site coordinators. We love to line up more than one for each site so that if one person has a meeting or is out of town, the other one can serve the site coordinator role in the event of a migration. So if this sounds like something that might be up your alley, drop us a line. We'd be happy to talk with you about it. So we've talked about a lot of the details on big nights. Now let's pull them all together into a little timeline of what to expect on big nights. When to go out, how long to stay, what to do when you're there. So most of our volunteers arrive at their crossing sites shortly after sunset, as amphibian activity won't really get going until it's dark. If you've driven there, make sure to park safely, well off the road and not in anyone's driveway. And then before you leave your car, make sure you have everything you need for a safe and comfortable time on the road. Reflective vest, flashlight, headlamp, pencil. If you wear glasses, you want to make sure you have a brimmed cap to keep rain off of your glasses. If you're at one of our well-established crossing sites and there's a site coordinator, we ask that you check in with them upon arrival. They can give you a data form. They can also orient you to anything you might need to know about that site on that particular night. You'll know if there's a site coordinator there because there will be Salamander Crossing signs or traffic cones, and you'll see someone in a reflective vest that says Harris Center on the back in reflective lettering. Those are our site coordinators. If you're at a site that doesn't have a site coordinator, you can just get going as soon as you arrive, but you want to be extra careful around traffic because there won't be cones or signs to alert drivers to your presence on the road. Once you've checked in with your site coordinator, you're basically going to walk slowly up and down the road. We suggest that you walk in the lane facing traffic for safety's sake so that you can see oncoming cars better. And then you're scanning the pavement with your flashlight and you're looking for little rocks with upturned ends. Those are often frogs, or for leaves or wiggly sticks. Those are often salamanders. When you find one, you're going to move it across the road in the direction that it was heading. You're going to note it on your data sheet by species, and you're going to keep going that way throughout the night. As we've said, we do like to collect information on road-killed animals, so if you find a dead animal, you can note that on your data sheet as well. We do ask that you remove it from the road if you've included it on your data sheet. It's great to work in teams where one person shuttles salamanders across the road and the other person records data. Now, amphibians will migrate all night long if conditions are right. But there are times when amphibian activity can slow or stop entirely, and that's when temperatures might drop below 40 degrees, or the rain might stop and the road might start to dry up, and then amphibians will kind of just hunker down and amphibians activity will slow for the night. So you can know that it's time to leave when there's not a lot of amphibian activity on the road, but also you get to decide how much time you spend. Some people spend half an hour, other people are out there for 4 or 5 hours. It's really up to you. Many of our volunteers tend to stay till 10 or 11 at night if there's a ton of amphibian activity on the road. If you're at a site with a site coordinator, we do ask that you check out with them when it's time to leave. You can share your counts with them to be included in all the counts for that particular site. And it's also just a nice safety measure so that they know that you're leaving. And we also collect information on volunteer effort, so start time and end time is a big part of that. If you're driving, of course, you want to drive very slowly and carefully on your way home, lest you hit any critters on the way. And when you do get home, if you were at a site where there was no site coordinator, we ask you to head straight to your computer or phone and to enter your counts via the online form at harriscenter.org and to share any photos with us as well. These can be photos that are just fun photos from Big Night that you want to share with the greater Salamander Brigade community, or photos of species that you need some help identifying. The sooner you get that data in, the sooner we're able to share it with other people. So we encourage you not to wait too long. What if you've looked closely at our map and there simply aren't any known amphibian crossing sites near you? We generally discourage people from driving long distances on migration nights, both because weather conditions could be very different from one site to the next, and also because how many amphibians might you inadvertently run over on your way to help other amphibians? There are very likely amphibian road crossings occurring in every town in the Granite State, and we need your help to put them on the map. So if you don't see any crossings in your town on our map, the next best thing to do is to perform a driving survey on big nights to try to investigate several potential crossing locations and get more information about them. You're going to start by doing some of the same things all of us are doing. You're going to watch the weather for conditions that are right for migration. You're going to watch the clock and head out after dark. You're also going to watch for wetlands, and this is something you can plan out ahead of time before big night. The vast majority of our known crossings occur when there is a vernal pool, pond, lake, or wetland on one side of the road and a forested hillside on the other. So think about your town and identify a few locations ahead of time where that configuration exists and plan to go and check them out on big night. Another way to find potential crossing sites is to check out iNaturalist.org. iNaturalist is a website and an app where community scientists all over the world can report species observations. You can search by species and by town. So look for spotted salamander, wood frog, spring peeper, or Jefferson salamander observations on or near roads in your town, and you might just find a new crossing site. When you're doing driving surveys, we recommend bringing a friend or a family member so that one of you can focus on looking for amphibians and the other one can focus on driving safely. It's also more fun with a friend. When you're nearing a potential crossing site that you've identified, drive slowly, 15 miles per hour max. Any faster than that and you won't be able to see small amphibians on the road. We also recommend that you turn off the radio, roll down the windows, and listen carefully. The quacking of wood frogs or peeping of spring peepers might be the first sign that you're nearing a crossing. Be sure to scan the whole road, both lanes, for amphibians. Remember, at a site without crossing brigade volunteers to help move them across, you're more likely to see a higher number of dead amphibians. They stay on the road longer than live ones do. So your first sign that you're nearing a crossing site might be a hopping frog or a crawling salamander, but it also might be a collection of roadkill. If you do find a site with a number of amphibians, live or dead, on the road, and you're prepared for being out of your car, meaning that you have a reflective vest, rain gear, flashlight, you might want to consider spending a little time at that site to investigate it. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, depending on how many critters you find. The first step, of course, is making sure to park safely, well off the road, and not in people's driveways or in front of their houses, which can make them understandably nervous. You can download data forms for scouting out new crossing sites at harriscenter.org. Use one data form per site. The first page has space for recording detailed location information, including parking, so other volunteers can find your site again, as well as safety information, such as traffic level, speed limit, and the presence of shoulders, sidewalks, and street lights. In general, we're looking for sites with enough traffic where volunteer efforts to move amphibians across the road will make a difference, but not so much traffic as to create a serious safety hazard for our volunteers. There's also space for recording your start time, end time, and weather conditions. If it was just a quick visit, or you were out in suboptimal conditions for amphibian migration and you didn't see any amphibians, we won't necessarily assume that it's not a crossing site. However, if you were there for an hour or more on a perfect amphibian migration night and you still didn't see any critters, that might be a sign that this isn't a road crossing site after all. You can download data forms for scouting out new crossing data and notes just like any other crossing site. Use one data form. We ask you to fill out a separate form. The first page has space site. So if you investigate detailed location sites in a given night, that would be 3 forms. So other volunteers can find your site. After that, you can share all of this information with the Harris Center, such as online data submission forms at harriscenter.org, shoulders, sidewalks. There we have 2 separate forms. In general, we're looking for sites with enough traffic or volunteer efforts to move amphibians across the road. one for reporting the locations, but not so much traffic road crossing sites.
One more fun aspect of the Salamander Crossing Brigades to share with you.
There's also space
for
for recording your start time and
document
and
spot
whether we'll have it in our record. If it was just a site visit or you were out in these suboptimal conditions for future nights or in future years,
many people are surprised to learn
won't necessarily assume
patterns
that it's not a crossing site.
Are a bit
However,
like
if you were
fingerprints
there
on
for an
humans.
hour or more, the second page has space for amphibian migration night, count data, and notes just like any other cross might be a sign
from one
that this
year
isn't
to
asked
the
to
next.
fill out a
We can
site
actually
after all
tell
for
whether
each
we're seeing the
new
same
crossing site. You can
individual
download data
over and
forms for
over
scouting
again.
out new
As a
crossing
reminder,
sites
spotted
at
salamanders can live
harriscenter.org.
upwards of 20 years.
After that,
They're
data
not
share
worn by
all this
barred owls or
information
hit
with the
by
Harris
cars.
Center
So this
via the
provides
online
really
data submission
interesting
forms at
data on
www.cc.org.
survivorship
There
and
we have two
longevity
other
in our
volunteers,
salamander
one specifically
population
for
that we see
amphibian, as well as
data
safety and weather
sites.
information, such as traffic, and
For
a separate one for
here's a
reporting
spotted
the
salamander
location,
that we
shoulders,
encountered on
sidewalks,
both
and road
inbound
crossing sites.
migration into its
In
breeding
general, we're
grounds
looking for
and
sites with
road
enough traffic
migration
for
away
volunteer
from
information
to
to
one
move
prior.
amphibians across the
How
road.
do we
That
know
will
that
have
it's
it
the
in
same
our records.
salamander?
But not
So
so
if you
much
decide by
to
looking
visit
at these two
one of
spots
these
that are
sites
spaced far
again
apart.
on future
And
nights
these
or
two
in
that are
future years.
attached
There's also
from
space
the
for
tree
recording
at the
start
base of the
time,
head.
end time, and weather conditions. If it was just a
prove
quick
that those
visit,
first two
or you were
photos
out in
weren't a fluke,
suboptimal
here's
conditions,
another
space for
salamander that we
recording
encountered
and
on
data and
inbound
notes,
and
just like we
outbound
won't
migrations
necessarily
since
assume
2014.
that it's not a
The year we
crossing site.
started
Fill out a
the
separate.
spot
However,
pattern
if you were there
project,
for an
you
hour
can
or
see that
more
these spots
on a
are the same
perfect
as well as the
amphibian
crown
migration
on the
night
head.
that still didn't
The
see any
closer you
critters,
look, the
that might
more
be a sign. After that, you can share
distinct
all
these
of this
patterns
information
begin
with
to
the
appear.
Harris Center via the online data
You can
submission
download
form
data
at
forms for
scouting out new
35
crossing
individual
sites. There we have
salamanders
two
that
separate
have encountered
forms.
on at
One
least
is
two
one
different
data
amphibian
amphibian
at our
percent
North
data
Lincoln
and
Street
associated
crossing.
weather
The first
information
page
has space and a separate one for reporting
detailed
locations
locations
of
of
new
individual
amphibian hard
salamanders at
crossing
that
sites.
site
So other
that have
volunteers
been
can find
encountered
your site
on
again.
2 or
Road
more
as well as
different
safety
years, though not
information
necessarily
such as traffic
consecutively.
level. After that, we'll have it in our
presence
records.
of shoulders,
So if you decide to
sidewalks.
visit
Salamander
one
was
of
moved
these
across
sites, in
North
general,
Lincoln
we're
Street by
looking
our
for sites
volunteers
or enough
5
traffic where
years
volunteers
in
go
a
straight
row,
to submitting
from
route amphibians
2014
across the
through
road will not be
2018.
forward.
Possibly
not
more
so
than
much
that,
time.
because
That's
we
it.
didn't start taking these
The
spot
second
pattern
page
photos
has
until
space for recording
2014,
amphibian
so we
count.
don't
There's
have
also space
information
for
about
recording
individual
any other crossing
salamanders
time
dating
and weather
back to
conditions.
earlier
To fill out
years.
if it was just a quick visit, or you were out in
So you'd like to
suboptimal
take
conditions
spot
for
pattern
amphibian
photographs
migration
and
and given
include
night
it in our
and
database.
amphibian
Here
forms, we
are
won't
a few
necessarily
tips.
assume
After
that you can
First,
share all this
stick
information
with
with the
spotted.
Harris However, Center. if you were
Although
there
we
for
love
an
to see
online
and
data
share
submission on a
photos of
perfect
all kinds of
amphibian
different
migration
forms,
night, and you
only
still there we
spotted
have two
salamanders
separate
have these
forms
unique
that might be
identifiable
specifically for
patterns.
amphibian
So
count
for this
data and
database,
associated
it's
weather
spotted
information.
salamanders only.
And a separate one for data forms for
There's
scouting
true
out
value
new
in this
crossing
database
site road
by
crossing
being able to
sites.org.
compare
You
photos
only need
to
one
submit
data
to
form
your
road
site.
crossing
So for
location
this,
information
first to stick with our
space.
well-established
After that, we'll have it in our records.
specifically
So if you
these
decide to
spots.
visit
Jordan
one
Road
of other
East
volunteers
Scenes,
can
North
find
Lincoln
your site
Street
future
in
nights or in future
Swansea
as well as
Lake
safety
Road in
and straight to
Swansea,
submitting
such
your
as
amphibian
Matthews
traffic
Road in
level from
Swansea,
that point
and Nelson
forward.
Road in
Shoulders,
Nelson.
sidewalks,
These
and
are the
street
5
lights.
sites where we have
Second,
the
in
most
general, we're
robust
looking for
collection
sites
of
with enough
photographs
traffic
so
data
far,
and notes,
but
just like
where
any
to
other
move
crossing
future
across the
photographs
road will
will
make a
make the
difference. We
most
ask you to
difference.
fill out a
But
separate
not so
form
much
for
traffic
each
is
new
created
crossing
For your
site
photos
as
to
you
be
investigate
useful
our
as
volunteer
spot
sites
pattern
in a given
data,
night.
you
There's
need
also
to
space for
photograph the
recording your start
salamander's
time,
head
end time,
and
after that,
back
and
from
weather
above,
conditions.
and
This
make sure that
information with
both
the Harris
sides
Center.
of
Quick
the
visit via the
salamander
online
are clearly
suboptimal
visible.
conditions
The
for
photos from
amphibian
directly
migration. You didn't
above
see
are
any
the
there we
only
have two
useful
separate. We won't
forms.
necessarily
One
assume
specifically
while
for
this
not
one
a
is
crossing
adorable
site,
and
it's no
associated
good
weather
if
you were there
spot
for an
pattern
hour
data.
or more,
And the
and a
same
separate
thing
one
here.
for reporting the
This is what
amphibian
we're
migration
looking
night,
for.
and you
Amphibian
still
road
didn't
It's
see
best
any
if you
critters.
can put the
That might be a
salamander on
sign
something that
that
has
this
limited
road
glare,
crossing
like your
site
data
should
form or
information
clipboard.
one time.
Some of our sites
You can
after that
download
will
data
have
forms for scouting
light
out. So if you
boxes
decide
with
to visit
modified
one
coolers
of
that
these
have LED
sites,
lights in
again,
them.
use
You
one
can
data
photograph
form
the salamander
years,
inside
you
the
can go
light box.
straight to
First,
submitting
really,
your amphibian
any
count data from that
recording
point.
data
Detailed
form
location
or
information,
clipboard is a
and
fine
that's it.
background.
So other
The
volunteers
second
can
page
find
has
your
space
site
for
again.
thousands as well as data and notes, just like any other traffic level, speed limit, the presence of a shoulder per sidewalk, so we don't have to sort through all your images. In general, we're looking for sites with enough traffic or volunteer efforts to move amphibians across. After that, you can share all of this information with, but not so much traffic is via the online data session in order to make the best use of the spot. There's also space for recording your start time without specific and weather conditions, count data, and it was just a quick visit or you were out in a separate one for reporting the location migration and you didn't see any crossing sites. We won't necessarily assume submit that it's not a crossing site. And if you're really however, if you were there for an hour or more after that perfect amphibian migration night, decide to visit one of these sites, that might be a sign future nights, or if you're crossing site, go straight to submitting your amphibian count. So you can download data forms for scouting out new crossings. That's it. The second page has space one data form in which the first data and notes, just like any other crossing site.
photo file to
detailed
today.
location
Jordan
section
Road,
form for
415-18,
so other volunteers can
he
investigate
submitted a second photo of a
as well
second
as
salamander from that very same
such as
site.
traffic. After that, you can share all of this information with the Harris
sidewalk
the online data submission. In
You
general, we're
know,
looking
this
for
last
sites
part just
where
sounds like
traffic
gobbledygook
there
to
we have
you
two
or
separate
crazy
forms.
text
Move
speak.
amphibians
One
across the road
specifically
will
for
make
You can
amphibian
ignore that
count
part,
data
but we
and
do
not
still
so much
need
traffic
date and
data
site
serious
in
and a
order to
separate
make
one for
sense of the
reporting the
area.
locations of new amphibian
There's also
road
space for
crossings.
recording
Final
your start
thoughts on
time
the
and
value
time
of
to submit
community
weather
science
road
projects
crossing
like this one.
location. It was just a quick visit
Every
when we
year,
were out
people
in
ask
after
people
that we'll
how
have
the
it in
salamanders are
migrations.
doing.
So if you decide to
Other
visit
populations,
one of these
we won't
sites
compare from
again
one year
on
to the
future
next
nights, not
or
across
one
the
site.
years, you can go
However,
straight if you were there for an hour or
Now,
more
because
on a perfect
everything
amphibian
about this
migration
project
night and you
varies
still
greatly
didn't see any
from year to
critters.
year.
The second
It's
page
really
has
hard to
space
answer
for
that
recording
question.
amphibian count
For
data
instance,
and notes just
if we
like
had the
any other
exact
crossing
same
site.
number
You
of
can download
salamanders
data
asked
forms
for
to fill out
scouting,
separate
and one of those
crossing
sites had
sites
2
at
volunteers,
harriscrossing.org.
and the other
If you
site had
investigate
20.
one data
It
form
stands
given
to
night,
reason
that
that
would be
20 volunteers would
First
encounter
page
a
has
larger
space.
After
proportion
that, you
of
can
the
share all
salamanders.
the
So we
location
might
with the
think
Harris
we
Center
had
in
more
Park.
salamanders
The
than the
online
other
volunteers
sites
can
when it
find
was
at
exactly the same.
harriscenter.org, as well as
There we have
Similarly,
two
we had
separate
some
forms,
years
such as
when
traffic
the rains
specifically
all
for
come
amphibian
at
count
2
data,
a.m.
associated weather
when
and
nobody's
street
out to
lights.
see
And a
or to
separate
keep
one, in
count.
general, we're looking
And
for
our
sites
counts are
with
very
enough
low for
traffic
those
where
years.
volunteer
But
efforts
doesn't mean the
to move
migration
amphibians
didn't
across
happen,
the road
or
make
that
a
there
difference.
weren't frogs and
But
salamanders
not so much
active at all of our sites.
After that,
we
we'll
weren't
have it
there
in
to count them.
volunteers. So if you decide
This
to also space
variability
for one of
makes
these
it very
start
difficult
time
to
again
make
on future
sweeping
weather
statements
in future years,
about
if it was just a quick visit
populations
when
in
we
our
were out
count
in
data
suboptimal
If we
conditions
really
for
wanted to
amphibian
do that
migration
at
and
some
you
of our
didn't see
sites,
any
we would do
amphibians,
what is
we won't
pictured in
necessarily
these
have
photos,
space
which is
for
set
not
up
a crossing
something called
count data
a
and
pit
notes,
wall
just like any
array.
other
for
crossing
This
site.
is
On a
fencing
perfect
that can be set up around a breeding wetland or a crossing site.
That might be a sign.
And when a salamander or frog comes into contact with that fencing and they
After
can't
that,
get where
download
they want
data
to go,
forms
they
and
can't
scouting
move
out new
through
crossing
it to
sites
their
via
breeding
the
wetland.
online
They
data
walk
submission
or
forms.
hop
There's one
along
data
it until
form
they
per site.
encounter
There
a
we have
trap
two
that has
separate
been
pages,
dug into
one
the ground.
specifically
That's what
for
you see on the right
detailed
there.
location
And
and
fall into that
associated
trap,
weather and
from where they
parking.
wait.
So other
And a separate
volunteers
one
can
for
find
reporting
site
captivated
locations
graduate
of
students
new
as
well as
amphibian
safety
crossing
information,
record them,
such as
and
traffic
measure them
level,
to
submit
submit
speed
them on the
limit,
other
road
side of the
crossing
bridge.
location,
This is where you
sidewalk,
find out information about
After
how
that,
many
in general, we're
salamanders
looking for
exist
sites
in a
with
given
enough traffic
population,
to visit
and how
one
they're
of these
doing
sites
from
and
one
when
year
on
to
future
another.
nights or in future
It is
years. You can not so
fascinating
much
work,
traffic
but it
as
is
to create
incredibly
safety
labor
point for
intensive,
our
and we
volunteers.
just don't have
There's
the
also
capacity
space for recording your
to do
start.
that.
Second page has space for and weather amphibian count data. If it was just a quick visit or you were out in suboptimal conditions, we ask you to fill out a separate form for any amphibian crossing site. We won't necessarily assume three sites in a crossing night.
This is a piece of land.
However, if you were there for an hour or more,
after
that you can share all of this amphibian migration night and you still didn't see any critters.
Land was cleared,
that might be a
sale
sign
sign
to
popped
adopt this
up.
isn't a
And the
road
Keen
crossing. There we have
Conservation
two
Commission
separate
was
forms.
reviewing a
One
permit
specific, you
application
can download
for
data
several
forms
houses
scouting out new
on this
sites
property.
at Harris Center.
Our
And a
Crossing
separate one
Brigade
for
program was
reporting
fairly
one
new
data
back then,
form
but they'd
new
heard
amphibian road
that there were
crossing
people
sites.
out
First
there
page has
moving
space to
animals off the
submit
road into
road
the
crossing
city. So they
location
called me and they
information one
said,
time. So other volunteers
after that,
can
what
find
can you
it
tell us
in
about this site?
So if you
As
decide
well as
to
it
visit
compare
one of
other
these sites
crossing
and
brigades
traffic
sites?
on future
Is
nights
it
or
important for
future years,
amphibians?
go straight to
Sidewalks.
submitting your
And I said,
street
well, I
lights.
can't really tell
In
you how
general,
it
we're looking
compares
for
to other
sites with
sites
enough
for
traffic
the
that's
same
it.
reasons
Your
we just
efforts
talked about.
to second page
But what I can tell you is that the other night,
data,
but
and
not
notes,
so much
just
4
like any
hours,
other crossing
20 volunteers came out
We ask
and they
you to fill
moved
out a separate form.
838
There's also space
frogs
for recording your
across the
start
road.
time. You investigate
All of those
and
frogs
sites in a
were
given
going
night. That would
onto
be
that
if it was just
piece
a
of
quick
property.
visit, or you were out
After that, you can share all
the
838 frogs.
see any amphibian.
What if I had
won't
simply said,
necessarily assume
there's a lot of frogs there?
There we have,
Without a
however,
number
if you were there
attached
for
to
an
it.
hour or more,
What is a lot for
perfect amphibian migration night, whether
Is
still
it
shouldn't
100?
see any
Is it
critters, and a
1,000?
separate one that might be a sign
The numbers
this isn't a
tell a
road
story
crossing site after
that
all.
words can't
You
tell.
only need to
And in
submit
this
download
case,
data
they
forms
were so
scouting out new
that the
crossing
Conservation
sites.
Commission not only
After that, we'll have it in
one
our
data
data form if you decide to visit one of these sites again on future nights or conservation, you can go straight to submitting your amphibian so other volunteers can find your site again,
amphibian pathway.
as well as safety information.
We hadn't had the numbers of amphibians or the numbers of people
and notes
who were putting their own comfort aside to go out on rainy nights and move animals off the road, and so demonstrated a real depth of concern and care for these critters in their community.
After that, you can share all of this information with the Harris Center. There's also space for online start time and city of Harris and weather conditions. There we have just a quick visit to the Harris Center in the suboptimal conditions for data, so you will see any amphibian migration. migration,
and a separate one
necessarily
for
specifically
reporting
to ensure not a cross passage for road crossing.
However, if you were there for an hour or more on a perfect road amphibian migration night and you still didn't see any critters, after that might be a big night detour. If you decide to visit one of these sites again, you can download data forms for scouting out straight and so far harriscenter.org. Use one data form per site, and that's it. Protection. The first page, second page has space for recording hotel locale data and notes, just like any other process, so other volunteers can find your site. You fill out a separate project, as well as safety and working with the Harris Center. 70,000 sites crossing nights, shoulders, sidewalks, to lay eggs. After that, in general, we're looking for sites that have enough traffic where volunteers online and services
homework assignments. If you want to become
there we have
Salamander
separate
Crossing
hours.
Brigade
One specifically for
First,
educating
data
there's also space to record a separate one for information and weather news. The first, it was just a quick survive. We were out here
download it.
road
Salamander
crossing
Crossing Brigade volunteer materials page.
After that, we have it, but we hope they not across. If you decide to visit, however, if you were there for an hour or more, on a 7,000 migration night, one is a Harris Center. That might be a slide egg. To survive it, amphibian migration. The second page has space you can download data forms,
find them
just
at
like any other
Harris
or on the
Harris
Center's
Center.
page. One fill out a separate form project.
Gather your field
First,
series.
70,000 sites, detailed location report, second parking at Georgia. After that, you can share
Sign up for our email list,
as well as see our online volunteers, traffic
migrations are likely, as well as field reports for
general enough traffic for volunteers. A separate one for reporting the reports.
And lastly, we
not working with the Harris survive road crossing. There's also space for after that, we'll have it and weather aside because it was just a quick visit and we're out in suboptimal conditions. That's 70,000 amphibians in 2020.
You can imagine that huge amount of salamander related correspondence during Salamander not always so far every
that might be asked to fill out a separate
if you still have questions, strongly encourage you to check out the data for Salamander Crossing Brigade webpage.
After that, you can share all just one data for Harris Center and begin working online exposed there we have two separate partners. One is the specific finders data as well as
Salamander Force
7,000 traffic
even has a list of Crossing Brigade programs
2020 survive. In general, we're looking for sites with enough traffic at Georgia. After that, we'll have it as the road besides seven, not so one of these sites again or
individuals doing
there's also space for reminder start time and port, but we hope weather people are that's it. It was just a quick enthusiasm. We're out in suboptimal conditions. Data and notes just like any other Harris Center. We won't